The intention is very important. The intention of IMBOLC is to give knowledge. So we are old school of magic, because we teach things which is not familiar, which is not zeitgeist specific.
Salutations, listeners, and welcome back to Glitch Bottle, the podcast where we uncork the uncommon in magic, mysticism, and the generally misunderstood. Today, we are honored to talk about the IMBOLC Magical Institute with founder Agrippa and his former student, Frater Acher. Magician and author Frater Acher is no stranger to Glitch Bottle, and we're so excited to welcome him back. And we're also very honored to be speaking with Frater Acher's former teacher, magical colleague, and friend, Agrippa, who in 1992 founded the independent Western Magic Distance Learning Training Institute known as IMBOLC. This is the first podcast interview that Agrippa has ever done, and we're so thankful for Agrippa taking the time and for Frater Acher making this interview happen. Agrippa is from northern Bavaria and holds a Master of Arts in German Studies and Philosophy. He's also completed an apprenticeship as a craftsman, a journeyman degree, and Agrippa is a trained taxidermist, has experience in alchemy and fragrances, served in the German military, and has a classical music education in piano and composes both classical and modern pieces. He's also a practitioner of the Japanese martial art kendo, and Agrippa is a cyclist and a mountain biker. Basically, listeners, Agrippa is a polymath, and is there anything that Agrippa has not done? Well, we hope to learn more about Agrippa and the founding of IMBOLC and everything in between. And now to help us uncork the uncommon, let's welcome Agrippa and Frater Acher. Agrippa and Frater Acher, thank you both so much for coming on the Glitch Bottle podcast today.
Hello, Alex. Thank you very much for having me. I'm very happy to be here. And yeah, let's go.
Agrippa, I think I asked Frater Acher the same question when reading his biography a few years back. Do you ever sleep, by the way? Because you seem to be incredibly accomplished and very busy.
Yeah, that's right. I think 4 or 5 hours a day. So that's okay. That's enough for me.
Can you please introduce yourself to the listeners who maybe have not checked out IMBOLC before or heard of you? Who is Agrippa?
Yeah, you have said a lot in the introduction about my vita, and maybe to add on, I'm born in Rothenburg of the Tauber. It's a very little town in Middle Franconia where time seemed to have stood still since the late Middle Ages. So picture Google it and you will see the great city. I was a bilingual tourist guide for museums there from time to time in my youth to earn a little extra money. The other things you have told, that's right. I think that's enough about me as a private person, because for me, it's not that interesting. That it is important to know very much about me, because it's more important to know things about the egregory of IMBOLC and the school IMBOLC and the teaching system, which we will talk about. At IMBOLC, I am called Master Agrippa because I have the highest degree in that school, and I'm the founder and the head of this school. It's really a private school, providing a solid education in Western magic, Hermeticism, and Kabbalah. A few decades ago, I was a member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and also a few other magical microgroups, you could call it microgroups. And then from the 2nd of February, 1992, I founded that school, which is for us in Germany also an acronym. IMBOLC is an acronym and means in German Internationale Magische Bildungsstätte für okkulte Lebenskunst und Credo. So that's the German pronunciation and meaning. In southern Bavaria, with 2 independent curriculums, the long-term distance learning course and the private teachings. And the latter go into much more detail. There, the student also learns Hebrew and cuneiform script, the hieroglyphs, for example, and none of these is the case in the distance learning course. So it's two sides of a sword. We are a distance learning school and I have a lot of mentors, but I'm also teaching things in private lessons, and it's called private college, where you can learn much more than you can do in the distance learning course.
When you founded IMBOLC in 1992, it was in early February. Can you talk about, I'm sure many listeners might also know about IMBOLC as being a Gaelic traditional festival that marks the beginning of spring. Can you talk about that relationship?
Yeah, of course. Usually people hearing the name IMBOLC have an immediate association with the festival or the purification taking place on that date. It's February the 1st, from the 1st to the 2nd. And as you probably know, the word itself is an old Irish, Scottish name and means in or from the belly. And it's also renewal, new beginning, cleansing, all-round washing. So it's also a pagan and neo-pagan festival nowadays. And so the reason I choose this term in 1992 was because it perfectly describes what IMBOLC, our school, really is all about. It is renewal and cleansing. Your mind, your mindset, your thinking, your practice, your meditation, everything. However, IMBOLC, as the name of our school, is primarily a German acronym, which unfortunately only makes sense in German speaking. I told you before what it means. In English, we would say International Magical Education Center for the Occult Art of Living and Credo. The term IMBOLC, therefore, has a double meaning as a word and as this acronym. And we have also a very important logo of the school. In turn, it's also a sigil composed of the letters of IMBOLC representing a living being, which is a person who walks along, bent over, and still earthbound. And in this context, I would like to remind you of the graphic animation we have published on our Facebook presence. Yeah, that's the origin of the name IMBOLC.
Can you share a little bit more about the crew at IMBOLC and how it's kind of structured?
Yeah, the crew consists of so-called mentors. They are trained and appointed exclusively by me. Those are students who went through the private college as well. So at IMBOLC, every student is assigned to a mentor from the first day of the studying and receives this way the proper supervision from the very beginning. The mentors are also long-time members. The difference in degree between a mentor and a student must be at least 2 degrees. So mentors are therefore usually also active students in higher study modules and also private students in the private college. But we do not have that much mentors, about 6 at the moment.
How did you first become immersed in magic and esotericism? What is that? Yeah.
I hope I did not disappoint you and your audience, because as I was not initiated at a young age by a witch into magic or occultism like so many others. Yeah, I had some strange phenomena when I was younger, maybe about 16 years old, mainly when anger and rage were involved. I was very fascinated by those phenomena, by the way, and which is why I started to read about it at first and afterwards experimented with what I have learned at the Golden Dawn. The key word here is also sigil magic. So that was the first kind of magic in the early 80s, which I have done. I learned to read relatively early in my life and was extensively involved with Western classical philosophy. And strangely enough, for such things as alchemy and hermeticism, gnosis, no religion. Well, for example, my friends at the time still thought nothing of it, so they found it very boring. It was a lonesome way, but yeah. When I was 18, then it was 1982, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn drew my attention, and then I became a member for about a decade, I think, while I continued to live in Germany. So I'm in the most southern area of Bavaria, by the way. So I commuted a lot between Germany and England during that time. I left the order with a Jupiter degree, which is a seventh degree called in Latin Adeptus Exemptus. My mentor died at an advanced age, and he strongly encouraged me to create an occult school by myself in Germany. He mentioned it should be not offshoot of the Golden Dawn, no offshoot of the Golden Dawn. He knew that I had so much knowledge about alchemy and Hermetic things and Carl Gustav Jung and all these things. Doesn't matter at the Golden Dawn. So he told me I would be gifted to impart this kind of knowledge to third parties in a neutral manner, not linked to any order or lodge. So this is how IMBOLC was born in 1992. So it's no offshoot of the Golden Dawn, because that's what I always asked. Hey, you have been so long at this school or at this order. It must be the teaching of this order, but that's not the truth. Yeah.
At IMBOLC, can you give us some of the broad strokes as what does a student learn? What are the different topics? How is it structured?
Yeah, very good question. Very important question. But oh dear, I don't even know how to start here. So the short version, okay? We have to do an own podcast about the content and the isms taught by IMBOLC. Yeah. But yeah, what does a student learn? So initially, it is a kind of teaching of the basics, as Aleister Crowley, everyone knows this person, already did it in his Liber ABBA. It's the book 4. It's called also Magic in Theory and Practice. In other words, a mainly inner process of dealing with oneself, one's own soul mirror, lots of asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, you know it, yeah, yoga, contemplation, meditation, concentration, exercises, and so on. And this process is primarily located in our atrium. So the beginners have to start in the atrium, but naturally accompanies us more or less throughout our lives. But of course, there's much more to it than the knowledge just mentioned. We are no Thelemites either. Fundamentals are also practical spiritual alchemy, Rosicrucian magic, and a lot of Kabbalah. I speak Hebrew, and I teach Hebrew and Greek and Latin in the higher courses. And if you want to learn and practice all of this conscientiously and consistently, a distance learning course easily takes about 10 till 15 years. 10 by 15 years, I would say. Depends on an individual and his commitment to studying. So, however, all of our courses are modular, which means in parts that are independent of each other in terms of time, which means a student can work on the teaching letters for 6 months, for example, or 1 year or 2 years or 4 years, or as Frater Acher for 10 years, and up to his own personal abilities and lifestyle, you know. It's a great problem in our time, the lifestyle. And you can more or less complete most of the magical topics in the semesters. The content or the isms, that's very complicated because the structure has nothing to do with the Golden Dawn or any other group or OTO. Yeah, you have to visit our homepage, our website at imbolc.com, and there you can learn about these topics.
This is something Frater Acher and I have spoken about too, Agrippa, and I'd love your thoughts on this, which is when new people approach esotericism or occultism, it's so overwhelming in so many ways, right?
Absolutely.
Tarot, divination, grimoires, Greek forms of evocatory procedures, there's so many different things. Can you share more about, with IMBOLC, this empowers the practitioner to independently learn and take their time with a variety of foundational topics and then build up from there. Can you share about that?
The system is fourfold, which means first all students start in the atrium, which is about 2 modules and 18 months to learn. What does it mean, learning? It means theory and practice. And a lot of newbies have a lot of theory in mind and no practice. So we have to force the practice thing. So this is always individual because we know the vita of our students and then we decide what's the main point there. So the teaching letters are static, but the mentor decides what's the best case to perform the teaching letters to the student. And this is the atrium. That's the most important part. Maybe Frater Acher can tell about this atrium also a little bit later. And after the atrium, it followed by the elementary. You know this from the 4 elements, yeah? Or in the Kabbalah, it's the Chaim, Malchut, Yesod, Hod, and so on, yeah? So this is the 4 elementary degrees, which is 4 modules, also 2 years to learn, and then the adaptship, and then comes the master's. And the master's is 8 degree till 10 degree, also 3 modules. And if you are very strong in magic and perform it every day, and if you are good in the exercises, you can get a master in about 15 years, I think. I don't know when Frater Acher left IMBOLC. I think he was 5 degree, but we speak about that later, I think. Each module takes an average of 1 to 2 years to develop, but the atrium is completed after 1.5 years. So that's the only static thing. It's the atrium. You must finish it after 18 months.
Excellent, Agrippa. Thank you so much for sketching that out. And I think this is a perfect time to bring in Frater Acher, Frater Acher, you obviously are incredibly accomplished. And one of the first things that you shared on a previous podcast when we first started chatting was the importance of IMBOLC and the importance of the foundational training that you had there and the direct experience. So can you share about when you were studying at IMBOLC with Agrippa, what did you enjoy the most? What were some of the foundational things that you learned?
Yeah, thank you, Alex. And hello, everybody. 2 of my favorite people on a podcast. So this is wonderful to join you here. Yeah, a couple of thoughts on that. I think probably the most formative and also enjoyable period was the atrium, the first 2 to 3 years that Agrippa just mentioned. And that is not to mean that the content later on wasn't of the same quality or anything. But when I rewind, this was 2001, I think, when I started. And when I rewind to that time, I recall, and now I can see it much clearer than I could see it at the time. You're in such a difficult place when you want to start learning magic practically and properly, because as Agrippa mentioned, many people like myself, you maybe have read about magic for a couple of years or maybe even a decade, but you haven't practiced it. And you don't know how to learn the practice. There's no videos or images or anything. You're trying to go into the unknown and become something that you don't quite know how it will look. And so the most important thing and the only thing that you really need is a place that teaches you and a place that you can unconditionally trust. That's the most important thing, because oftentimes this training will go against your grain. It will go against your intuition. You need a lot of discipline. And that is precisely the point, because you're not a magician and you want to become a magician. So this is freaking hard work. And so, in a world that's full of Instagram and everybody wants to learn everything, in 10-second feeds, this is the opposite. Like when you enroll with IMBOLC, my best advice would be give up any notion of time and trying to accomplish anything in this year or next year. I remember when I studied at IMBOLC, I always tried to go as fast as I possibly could, but I didn't compare. It didn't matter how fast other people went. It was just my own pace. And so do not look for, IMBOLC will take whatever, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. It might take 1 year or it might take 20 years. It doesn't matter. The question is, how deep do you want to go into the teachings, the curriculum, the experiences that, Agrippa and the team hold in store. So I think the first few years were the hardest, but also the most enjoyable, because you really need to develop completely new muscles. You need to change some aspects of your daily lives. And it is in these first years that you feel your own efficacy. You feel your own agency, that you actually can do this if you really want to. And the system really works. And so by the time you're in your 2nd, 3rd, 4th year, you already have these foundations. You already know how to study the teaching letters, how to do your examens, theoretical and practical ones. And these first few years, I would say, are incredibly formative, both as a magical student, but also as a human being. This is such an important lesson for all of us to learn, that once we set our mind to something, we can really accomplish and master it. And that's where I think the mentorship that Agrippa mentioned is so critical in addition to the teaching letters.
This is such a powerful curriculum. Are there any specializations? Are there any specific areas of focus that a student can, after the atrium, let's say, that they can choose to go into? Can you share about that?
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. But I have to make an add-on for the last question, because I place great emphasis on general knowledge and a sound scientific education, especially in astronomy, astrophysics, and quantum physics in the private college, not in the distance learning course only. So with personal supervision by me, which is an independent curriculum, it's an absolutely independent curriculum, which has nothing to do with the standard distance learning course. And this means that there is a lot of written teaching material available, additional material. I think about 3,000, 4,000 pages, and audio files, a lot of audio files in German and English language. I think that's also the reason why there are so many academics at our school. I think because there is such a great polymath current also at IMBOLC. But if you are a lateral entrant, it is not that easy to deal with the teaching material. Yeah, we have also a 32-degree Freemasons and very experienced witches as students, but paper is patient. Yeah, so it's like driving a car for years without having a driver's license, and then you get rid of the things you've wrongly acquired. But the focus on the private college is Kabbalah. Yeah, it's the Sefer Yesira, the Sefer HaSohar, the Sefer HaBahir, Sefer Raziel, Golem magic, Grimoire magic, and so on. Yeah. Okay, but now let's come to the question about specializations to choose. You can't choose it when you are not 7th degree or 6th degree. So you have to reach the 6th or 7th degree. And then you can choose your specialization if you want to go your way further on with IMBOLC. And this is ritual magic, which is mainly grimoire magic, the traditional stuff, it from Dr. Stephen Skinner and these books. Witchcraft as a special part, a theoretical and practical Kabbalah, which means you have to learn Hebrew, Old Hebrew, writing and speaking. Then voodoo and left-hand path magic, but we don't have a right-hand path part. But I must explain that. It has nothing to do that we are bad people or bad or dark gray magicians and we don't allow the right-hand one. It has to do with the Malchut power in the Yetz Chaim. So, voodoo, what voodoo is, but LHP is a great area. So I don't know where to start here in the podcast to explain what this means in detail, but you can choose this part as voodoo and a left-hand path. And the last one, that's very new. It started in 2021, which is quantum physics as science practiced as magic. It's a experimental path where I also learn a lot every day when I have time to. So now we have five areas. So.
Wow. Agrippa, this also leads to a question. Frater Acher, can you share a little bit about when it comes to choosing different specializations, different paths? You have chosen the ritual magic focus. Can you share a little bit about why and some of the background behind that?
Yeah. Alex, I'm sitting here smiling. I think people should really let this sink in. Some of our listeners might have been born in 1992 or, afterwards. And basically, here's Agrippa sitting in his house, a true polymath himself, developing content, teaching content day in, day out. And these are the fruits that we get to, harvest and benefit from. And so when, he's sharing how deep the curriculum is and how broad it is and how broad even the areas of specialization are, that is because the school has been around for a long time. And, Agrippa mentioned he sleeps 4 or 5 hours a day. So there was a lot of time in these last 30 years or so to develop this content. Now, I'm not a polymath, and Agrippa and I are quite different personalities. I can't even do really basic.
Absolutely.
So, every time I needed to take a written test with Agrippa, and there were many, many tests that I took, I grinded my teeth and really kind of was holding on to the table. I hate written tests.
The Kabbalah stuff. You hated the Kabbalah stuff.
Everything I needed to learn by heart was such a torture. But this is part of what you do. It doesn't matter whether you like it or not. It doesn't matter whether it's your fancy or not. Like, this thing works, so shut up and do it. Or don't, but then you won't learn the stuff, right? Now, for me, I always enjoyed the ritual magic stuff the most. Even before I had started, from really my teenage years on, I was very much into Martin Buber. I was very much into his worldview and what he was sharing. And so it's a very much a worldview that is based around the principle of dialogue, I and thou. And this is what you do in ritual magic. You enter into a dialogue with non-human persons. So that was always where I felt most drawn to. But as Agrippa mentioned, I actually didn't study far enough to get deep into the area of specialization. I quit before. So that would have been on the horizon. Or if I ever get back to the school, that's where I hopefully be able to pick up again.
But it was the best time to leave after 10 years. So there are a lot of private connections in 10 years with a teacher. So it was hard for me when my best student at this time left IMBOLC, but it was retrospectively, it was the best time that he is leaving and doing his own stuff with the things he had learned in so many years in our school.
A question for you, Agrippa, and then Frater Acher, if you can elaborate more on this, is Agrippa, can you share a little bit more in depth about how long the training is? Like you mentioned the first 18 months, obviously that's kind of a specific piece, but can you share anything more about the length of the training? And then Frater Acher, can you share a little bit more about why you left after reaching the 5th degree?
Well, this depends. Now that the teaching system is modular, this means that a student decides how far and for how long he or she wants to follow this path of magic. So he or she can stop after 1 or 4 semesters of study or follow the entire path with us for many years. So at the moment, I have 3 students which are 6th degree in the 7th year. And that's absolutely the topic at IMBOLC, because the most students, that's also a fact, are leaving IMBOLC after the atrium, because the zeitgeist is a problem and the speed of life is a problem, So I think after the atrium, you have decided to walk the way of magic more seriously, a little bit more seriously. So you don't make a difference between what you do all the day and when you go into your temple or when you are practicing magic. So you think it's all is one, So today's Frater Acher, for example, took the path up to the 5th degree. He was a student for 10 years without any interruption. Without any interruption. That's also very seldom. And he then decided to walk the path on his own from then on, very successfully, as you can see.
Maybe I can intersect there. Agrippa and I talk about this every now and then, that so many people are leaving after the first year, 18 months or so. And man, I wish they'd be calling me, in that moment where they're hesitating and it's like, I'm not sure. Should I not, and damn it. Like, I'd love to give them a strong kicking. Like this is such an important life decision. And I'm not saying that you should necessarily stay. Maybe you should go. But if you go now, you're stepping off a path that has something really profound to offer. And I'm saying that because year 3, 4, 5, holy shit, that's where it's really kicking in. That's where you will be really having fun and you'll be growing as a person. I want to get back to the IMBOLC logo, right? And Agrippa mentioned there's an animation somewhere on Facebook. This is hunched over person, drawn to the ground, and the whole training is meant to make you stand upright. That doesn't mean arrogant, but that means becoming a human being. And all the books that I've written since I left Agrippa School are about this very notion. You know, my book about Rosicrucian magic, my books about Paracelsus, they're all about this wonderful and incredibly hard thing of becoming a human being. So if you think you want to leave after 18 months, man, call me or think twice, you know, like don't do that easily. I left after 10 years, and I left because one, I had reached communion with my holy diamond, and that was very intense and immediately ready to give me instructions on how I needed to work. So that was at odds with another curriculum that I would have needed to do in parallel. And as I said, I'm not a polymath. You know, I don't get joy, you know, from just expanding my brain constantly in the sense that, you know, Agrippa would teach you if you continue to do. I think there's huge joy to stay until you've mastered the entire house, everything, if that is who you are. If you want to become a polymath, if you love learning, then this absolutely scores. So yeah, these I think were my two main reasons. I had found my teacher in my diamond, and that took me 10 years, and I walked as fast as I possibly could. So if that's what you think happened after a year and a half, no, that has not happened. These things take a little more time. And the second reason was that by nature, I'm not a polymath. So I really needed to force myself into the discipline that the curriculum required.
That is up for debate if you're a polymath. I think you do have some of the fingerprints of the polymath, but that's just me. And I am very biased because I am a big fan of all of your books and all of your works. And actually, Agrippa, something Frater Acher just mentioned was obviously, you know, he having communion with his holy diamond, that changed his path. This often comes up online or maybe with new students when they're thinking about this term of initiation and initiatory aspects. One thing says, yes, you mentioned of the Golden Dawn, et cetera. So to that point, can you share, is IMBOLC initiatory? Does it have those aspects?
A clear no. We are not a lodge or an order with a so-called succession, although we do have an egregore who reflects the soul and the spirit of our school. But although we award degrees according to a classic 10-degree system, as is the case with the GD and the OTO or the AA, for example, you know them. With us, you progress through the degrees by successfully completing the semesters. So this is done through theoretical and practical examinations, not more and not less. But at IMBOLC, however, the grades do not signify any initiation degrees or ranks in the classic sense of orders, or, for example, stars on military uniforms, because they are different. They represent, on the one hand, knowledge or increased knowledge, and on the other, magical experience and the magical ability. However, an 8-degree does not dictate anything to a 2-degree, for example, and it's no group action. The English motto is walk your own path into Western magic, you know, your own path. So you are alone. I remember a question from a listener of you, Alexander, who asked about the group power. So it's a separate question, I think. We do not have this group power, but we have an egregore because IMBOLC represents all the students. And we have a lot of students. So that's more power as the mentors. If you have a lodge like the Golden Dawn, then you have the high priest and you have the chancellor and so on, you know. That's the power. They represent something with their robes and their paraphernalia, and the neophytes and novices look at them. No, IMBOLC has nothing like that. You have to walk this way absolutely alone. And that's the hardest thing, I think, to get into this kind of learning. But you have a mentor on your side and you can ask him or her every day. And our approach is a Gnostic one, you know, based on recognition. and own insights. A progress a student makes comes solely from his or her own fire, which we call in Germany Forstian drive. You know, the German sorcerer, which Agrippa and Trithemius hated so much because he was not an academic sorcerer. And from his or her hard work and commitment towards own practice. So we are not initiatory, but the degrees represent your knowledge and also your scientific knowledge on the one hand, on the other, your magical experiences, which is subjective, and your magical power, which is objective. And this will be tested also.
You mentioned, Agrippa, the importance of individual learning, solo work, etc. And someone might be out there thinking, okay, what is the advantage, Agrippa, of studying magic in an institute versus, say, just saying, okay, I'm just going to go off in the forest. I'm going to read these 25 books and just go that way. Can you share about the advantages for that?
Autodidactical stuff, yeah. So, well, I think the main reason for this is that everyone is assigned a mentor on the very first day of their distance learning course with us, who advises them and is on hand to help with any questions or problems. So that's also the reason why studying with us costs money, because of the knowledge, the experience, and mostly the time that our mentors invest in our students. Let's talk about self-taught. This approach is very good in theory, but not in practice. Even the first attempts at sitting asana or controlled breathing, pranayama, can have health consequences, and so on. It's also advantage to exchange ideas with other students from the same semester, meeting online, etc. So I think that's the best learning in a school, where you can do your things alone, but you have your teaching letters, and I would say you don't have to leave the house to go into a temple room with other people. If you prefer that and you like that, then IMBOLC is not the best choice.
This goes to this beautiful question of why is it so important to have a mentor? And Frater Acher, I mean, just hearing you and Agrippa right there, where you have this, I can just tell this beautiful, very warm relationship. You know, Agrippa was saying, oh, you remember the Kabbalah stuff? And you were like, oh yeah, I remember that. So there's this beautiful intimacy and this relationship. Can you share why is it so critical to have a mentor when you are also taking individual learning as well?
Yeah, I guess there might be people out there who can just read books, go into a forest and just, teach themselves. Maybe these people are out there. I don't know. But I doubt that you can do that to the degree and depth of content that is offered in a place like IMBOLC. As I said, I was there for 10 years. I wrote, written exams probably every second month for 10 years. I don't think you can go at that speed and discipline without someone holding you accountable, without someone, that you have a relationship with. Now, when I studied at IMBOLC, Agrippa was my mentor, and I know some of the other mentors in the school now, and they're all damn good. And what I mean with that is that I think they can all hold the balance between caring for you and at the same time kicking your ass. That is something that at least when I was, however old I was, 2021, when I started, that's exactly what I needed. I needed someone where I felt that person has a real interest in me progressing on this path. They mean good, and yet they're not soft. They will take me to my edge and then a few steps further. So that, I think was incredibly important for me. Honestly, when I left after 10 years, it was also hard for me to leave Agrippa because there was so much safety in that relationship. There was so much trust in that relationship. And it was just wonderful to know your path. It was just wonderful. After I finished this teaching letter, there will be another teaching letter. And then there's another teaching letter. Like the path was just very clear, and it was hard to walk out into the unknown. So whether you do this for 10 years or 20 or 5, I think you want this relationship to form you and take the best of it.
What makes IMBOLC so unique?
The most important thing for a student is losing the fears. That was also with Frater Acher when he is in the night alone in the woods, or doing stuff he would never do when he don't have to. So we are a distance learning school, and that's a little bit different from that what Frater Acher learned, because he visited my home every weekend or every second week for a few hours, and we do lessons privately here. But this was 20 or 25 years ago. This does not mean that now IMBOLC is something absolutely different, but please let me explain what it is now. No so-called generation or age conflict due to independent work, for example, or for young and old alike. We have 21-year-old Russians and 69 years old French people. So it doesn't matter. If you have the will to do this, you can do it. Okay, if you are 69 and you are learning 10 years, then you are 79. Then you are an old person. That's right. But that's the decision of the student. We do not say no, that's no possibility. The next one is the increased effectiveness in terms of time and costs. And the teaching material is didactically prepared, special prepared for the distance learning. When Frater Acher was a student and a neophyte, it was a little bit different. The content was different because he visited me at my home. And now a student from the United States is not flying to me to have some teaching lessons with me. The next one is flexible examination times by arrangement with a mentor, and the modular structure. So it's possible to make a break between the courses and then go on. But I wouldn't prefer that. Yeah, it's not that good. But you can do it if you want, and you can drop out or terminate your studies per study semester. Then what's very important for most of our students is the guarantee of the anonymity and the discretion. So you have a pseudonym, you don't have to left your real name. The learning and the practicing in familiar surroundings, that's also a point for a lot of students. And the independent from distance. Remote support by a mentor. You can complete it while working with a daily time commitment. Free allocation of time to work on the course material and exercises without time pressure. Independent learning, but constant monitoring of success. The exams, you can repeat all exams. I can only speak for my school, you know. I don't know what Korea or other schools or lodges nowadays practicing or what they intend to do. The intention is very important. The intention of IMBOLC is to give knowledge. So we are old school of magic, because we teach things which is not familiar, which is not zeitgeist specific. So it's not that easy to get young students in a school of magic. The difference between IMBOLC and the order, we deal with different magical topics with no emphasis on a certain direction, the way it is in orders or lodges. Through our teachings, we provide students with a clear and independent from dogma frame to walk his or her path. We do not have an intention, a powerful intention. You have to do this and only this. Remember Aleister Crowley, for example, yeah? He was a guru, he was absolutely master, and you have to do what he is telling you, what magic is all about. In IMBOLC, you have your isms and your areas where you can learn. The students influence this frame individually while learning through the given material. So as they do so, they put, so to say, their own colors and fill it with own flavors. And this way, each student walks his own individual path to the Western magic while studying with us. So the teaching material is static. Every person is getting the same material. But the alchemistical process is the solve et coagula, with this material, the individual outcome. We are a school with a certain claim to polymaths, I said, yeah, which is like universal schooler that was so highly valued in the past. Typical representatives of such knowledge and aspirations were Athanasius Kirche or Roger Bacon or Alexander of Humboldt. But let me perhaps add that we pay just as much attention to the material as to the metaphysical. And this means, for example, that the natural science are also taken into account and taught at the private college only with me, which is the private studies. And then you learn really a lot about mathematics, astronomy, biology, chemistry, astrophysics, quantum mechanics. That's the truth. With us, you don't get very far with detached, typically esoteric behavior with subjectivity, because as in Zen Buddhism, for example, not much, if any, attention is paid to it. Yeah. Frater Acher, what do you think about studying at IMBOLC in the past?
I think two things come to my mind. I want to go back to what you said earlier, that things were a little different when I studied and I was at your house, and you could more or less physically kick my ass to get me to a place where I wouldn't go by myself. I think the same thing works virtually just as fine. You don't need someone to drag you out of their house when, something is on the schedule that raises fears. You just need someone to point you to it. So let me make this really clear. The first moment that I remember was what Agrippa was referring to earlier. There was a moment in the curriculum where I needed to spend a night out in the woods. And because Agrippa was living, surrounded by woods, I said, okay, I'm come to your house, and then, take me to a place that's far away enough and really remote, and then I'll spend the night there. And so I remember I was at Agrippa's place, and, it kind of dusk settled and it got dark, and, and I was looking out, I was like, it's probably going to rain. I can stay another night. We don't need to do this tonight. It's so cozy. I actually brought a beer. Why don't we just kind of chat, right? And what is really important, I was, 23 or so maybe at the time. I didn't know that this was actually fear. I didn't know. I just felt, it just doesn't feel right. It's probably not the evening where I should be doing this. And Agrippa just kind of gave me a look and said, shut the fuck up, pack your stuff, we're going to go. And it was only then that I realized I'm actually afraid. This is actually how fear feels. And that was a really important realization, to this evasive behavior, that you're just afraid. So
but you must explain that it wasn't in the woods where I lived. So we took our bicycles and we ride to about 2,000 meters into the mountains where I
it was far away, right? There was no way home. That was clear. There was no way home. But the important thing that I think would have worked via webcam just as much is someone calling out to say, Alex, you're just kind of pussyfooting around what you just need to do now, and today is the perfect night. And if it rains, and you'll be sitting in the rain and you'll be all fine. Just go. And so that is what I think the mentoring does. And whether you do that remotely or in person, it doesn't matter, because the mentor will see immediately when you're ready for something, but you're not acting as if you're ready. That's one thing. The other thing, why study at IMBOLC? I think I said was it an essay or a book, the way I made sense of IMBOLC when I left was that Agrippa from the beginning knew there's a certain kind of magician or witch or goes or whatever sleeping in me, but neither he nor I knew how that goes or witch or magician actually looks. And so it required drawing out of this person from the clay of my golem body through this teaching. And what is so unique about IMBOLC is the fact that it was written, designed, and composed by a polymath. And that's a really important point for people to understand. If you're a polymath, and let's look through an astrological lens or the lens of planetary magic, Saturn is equal to Jupiter, is equal to Mercury, is equal to Venus. You don't have freaking favorites. And when it comes to the isms, then planetary magic is not more important than Kabbalah, is not more important than astrophysics, is not more important than quantum mechanics. It's all equal. And that allows you as a student a freedom, because you get all this content without subtext. Never in the curriculum is Agrippa or your mentor trying to convince you that one thing is more important than the other thing. So you develop a freedom of drawing out your own tastes, your own preferences, your own relations that I don't think an order even tries to do. If you're in a Saturnian order, well, it's a freaking Saturnian order. Don't come if you don't like Saturn, right? But what do I know when I'm 20? I have no clue whether it should be Saturn or Jupiter or whatever. So the fact that the school was founded and upheld through such a polymath spirit, I think really helps the individual to enter a zone without agenda and only bring their own agenda.
You immediately had this wonderful deep relationship, but also accountability as you then almost like a blank canvas where everything's treated the same. The colors are thrown on the canvas in the same way, same force, same gravity. And then from that, you begin to paint, if you will, your own idiosyncratic affinities or focus areas. Would that be somewhat fair?
Alex, I would say it's even more raw than that. Agrippa shows you a workshop and he introduces you to every tool in this workshop. And it's a freaking large workshop. Now you then get to the canvas and say, oh my God, all these colors, this is so amazing, right? And I was in so many moments where I turned around to Agrippa and said, look at my picture, what I just drew, isn't this amazing? And Agrippa was like, yeah, well, whatever, let's get on, next chapter, right? And that is what you need, in such a school. It's not someone who shares your excitement for the ritual that you've just done. It's someone who grounds you and says, yes, this was one step, don't freak out, here's the next step.
Agrippa, I have to say on a previous podcast, Frater Acher shared, and he's written about this as well, about being alone in a cave. I think it was near the Alps or part of the Alps. And such a deep thing. And then I'm thinking, well, we have Agrippa to thank for that, because Agrippa was the one who
you totally have to,
right? Who told Frater Acher, get out there and overcome and synthesize your fear and use it as fuel and get out there. So we have you to thank for all of Frater Acher's.
You're right. And now he's going into the deepest holes. Yeah.
It's so wonderful, Frater Acher, hearing your perspective, wonderful perspective. It's accountability, it's ass kicking, and it's also a deep relationship. And now, Agrippa, may I ask you, as the teacher, what are some of the things that you look for in a student? What are some of the qualities that you say, this person would be a good fit to learn at IMBOLC?
Yeah, that's really not so easy, because it's not important for the first month. The first thing is that the student must be willing to invest at least, I would say, 1 by 2 hours a day in their studies, not more. Because if you do more, you are very excited and you want to do it and you are fascinated, and now it starts. Now I'm learning magic from the scratch, and you invest 8 hours a day. And then you, after 3 or 4 months, there is no more power, because it's like paper. And if you do fire on the paper, and it's nothing, you don't have power anymore. And so at least 1 by 2 hours. And the material gets more and more challenging from semester to semester. And there are no shortenings. So studying magic seriously for a longer time is a hard work, and a potential student needs to stay motivated over the time. So that is a really important thing, to get motivated. So a lot of students finish studying when their girlfriend is leaving them, or I don't understand it, but it's like that. He should also be disciplined and already have his daily life in good order. So a lot of persons are interested in magic and have no good order in their lifestyle. Many people take refuge in magic because they can't cope with everyday life. And that is not a good basis, If you only have a few hours at the weekend for your magic, you won't get very far. There must be a kind of Faustian desire I explained in a question before. It's also necessary to have your own internet connection, your own email address, that you can do these things for your own. You need your own workspace also, because our course takes place primarily online. That's the most important for the first month. And then the mentors will see, when they are writing their magic diary, what they are thinking, what they are feeling. And the first thing is they have to lost their paradigms, if you know what I mean. Everyone is having a paradigm, the main paradigm, which is safety for life, But as Frater Acher said, if you are polymath and you have a lot of isms to teach, everything is the same. The paradigms are defined, but everything is the same. And if you feel that, and if you know that from a Gnostical way, everything in magic is much more easier because you lost your fear. So much persons have fear that magic is functioning. That sounds silly, but yeah, because it's what we have taught from our parents about what Christianity told us about demons and angels and stuff like that. So yeah, okay. So he should also be disciplined and already have his daily life in good order. That's most important. It sounds silly and easy, but it isn't. Look how it is functioning today with TikTok and Instagram, and they are photographing their meals.
I think, though, Agrippa, that the training that you provide, it helps a lot to build a backbone, obviously for your magical life, but also for your mundane life. I can't imagine someone, developing a schedule where they have an hour every day, really follow through, like this is like university studies, but magic through and through, and then be completely lost in their life outside of that. At least personally, when I studied at IMBOLC and started, that was about the time when I was in university, and then gradually I entered work life. And honestly, what I actually studied at the real university did not all help me in my work life compared to what I learned at Agrippa's. I took so much for my work life, and I don't mean magical skills. I mean life skills. Not being afraid, being humble. Constantly wanting to learn. Having more interest in solving problems than in looking good. So many things came from that will help you, get to grips with your life.
Agrippa, can you share about what is the biggest challenge for a student studying at IMBOLC?
Well, in my opinion, the biggest issue may be the motivation for a longer period of studying. The student needs to be successful. So if the motivation does not come truly from the heart, but just, for instance, out of curiosity or actually any ego-related reason, sooner or later he or she quits. Another issue may be the time a student needs to deal with the given studying material. And this aspect is related to the individual situation of a student, of course, and whether he or she has family to be taken care of or other backgrounds binding the capacities and energy, as well as how skilled or experienced and majored he or she is. It is required a student has 1 by 2 hours per day while studying at IMBOLC, as I said. However, it is a given average, and not always a student is really free to take up studying activities day to day. If that happens temporarily and shortly, it is not a problem. But however, a longer period of not practicing usually ends in a dead-end street, and it is rather difficult to move forward. What do you think, Frater Acher? You can't say anything about it because you had no break in 10 years.
No, but your first point, the motivation is really important, and we're all different. I've learned. I'm now 46, and I've learned many years later that I really love independent study. I really love, I wrote all these books. That's a quite lonely business. You sit somewhere and you write. So I realized that didn't take any discipline for me to take a letter, sit down, work through the teaching. Other people might find that really challenging because they want to go to a party. I never wanted to go to a party. I just wanted to do this thing. So, we're all different, and we got to find the joy and the discipline. It's a mixture of both.
And this leads to another question, which you touched on, Agrippa, a little bit earlier, which is, why does IMBOLC not have a higher social media presence, for example, at Facebook and YouTube? And I know that Facebook, obviously, you mentioned the video, which we will link to.
We started. Yeah, well, we do have a Facebook presence where we sometimes post some content. All those posts, however, contain a link to our website, so our main internet presence where the most inquiries come from. So I think it's better to visit the web page. To us, studying magic is a long-term activity to obtain a sustainable success. It is the way of life and originates from the genuine calling of a heart. Okay. And our teachings refer to the universal truths which do not match the modern, often very short-term ideas. So, for example, TikTok is the best word there, because it's only for 5 seconds you have to make your audio and your visual devices to be important. So, but that's the zeitgeist. And for us, it is really a problem to make content that the persons are interested in. So this approach, as a consequence, does not align with those social media channels. So we do hope, nonetheless, to reach people who resonate with the old-fashioned and also the high-quality education, which is why I'm here today. But at IMBOLC, we have nothing against social media in general. The curriculum of us provides a student with a universal frame, which is timeless, I think, and for everyone the same, regardless of the background. So a student fills in this frame with his own way of being and his personal development. Some of our younger students use social media, and this way the influence of the modern aspects of life flows into their work. And that is, of course, allowed and treated as a personal, so to say, color of the individual path.
Just two thoughts here. First thought is, I want to use maybe a metaphor or a parallel example. Hopefully, many of the listeners are familiar with the works of José Alegra Gabriel Sabogal, my good friend who has illustrated many of my books. And his paintings are absolutely masterful, incredible, breathtaking. How did José get to that point? He needed to have a really decent, in-depth training to be a graphical artist. That took, years and years of practice, where he didn't post shit on Instagram because it wasn't good enough. And he just needed to really walk the hard way of learning how to draw hands and muscles and things from imagination and from photos and all of that, right? Now he's so advanced, he's at a place where he's every now and then posting the most marvelous shit. And that's the best thing about social media, that I can see José's images, flash up every now and then. So it does have a purpose. But ideally, when you have mastered a certain craft, then it can be, a creative outlet, not when you've begun. When you've begun, you shut up and you just get on with the work. And so from that angle, I think there's logic to it. IMBOLC doesn't need to flash around on social media. Hopefully they're present enough that people can find it. Hopefully this podcast helps. And then, you go into a retreat and you study as far as that's concerned. I myself today use social media quite actively, and I post a lot of my rituals. I post lots of photos and images and stuff. And sometimes people ask me about it. There's an underlying intent of my work that has a lot to do with the notion of beauty. And there's a magical connotations to it. There's a Kabbalistic connotation to it. And so I'm in the business of trying to create beauty from the land. And what I mean with that is not commercialized beauty, but it's beauty from the heart to the heart with the land. And so I have permission from the spirits to take photos and to post that. I'm not a teacher. I don't have a business. I don't mind whether 10 people like it or 100 or whatever. But, I enjoy capturing these moments and then sharing them. So these were just my 2 cents on social media here, and why I think it absolutely has its place and its purpose, but it also has its time, and it's not always its time.
Would it be fair to say, Frater Acher and Agrippa, that if you are on social media, that's great. It can be a powerful tool. It can be something, but posting on social media is, as you said, it's a creative outlet after you've put in the years and years of study. Social media is like the cream onto the icing on top of the cake. It's not the actual cake itself. It's not the actual deep layers upon layers of studying. Would that be somewhat fair?
Yeah, the key word is attention span. Yeah, I would say.
I agree. Social media is just like chocolate. Like I love chocolate. There's awesome chocolate. Or maybe like coffee. There's awesome coffee, but you can only have that much. When I have coffee and when I have chocolate, I want it to be the best. But I can only have that much on a given day.
Frater Acher, we do have a listener question for you, a few of them actually, which is no surprise. The first one is from Anonymous, who is saying, Can you please share about the importance of integrating one's magical practice with mundane life and perhaps share some of the practical means for achieving this balance?
Yeah, I'd love to. And I think we touched upon that earlier when we spoke about the value of the skills that IMBOLC teaches outside of a magical paradigm, just in your mundane life. My experience was that as I started out on the path, and that was probably the first 6 years for sure, it helped me a lot to keep my magical life completely separated from my mundane life. Sometimes in magic, we say it's important to keep the lid on the pot so that, you don't talk about it. You keep it really secretive. You evolve so fast as a magician, at least at IMBOLC, when, you're ready for it and you study a lot, that it just isn't helpful to constantly needing to explain to friends, spouses, whatever, what you have just gone through and what is next. So I really benefited from doing this as a lone practitioner and really separate from my mundane life, which is not to say that my mundane life didn't benefit from it. It did, absolutely, as I described earlier. Lots of skills were flowing into me as a human being that I could wonderfully apply in a work environment, for example. It was then many years later, probably after I had 15 years or so of practical experience, that this line began to blur. And I realized that the magician that I had become came through in business meetings, came through in, relationships everywhere. So I think that boundary will soften over time. But at least for me, it was really important to have this clearly defined petri dish of my magical practice for the first couple of years.
Frater Acher, we also have a last listener question for you, which is also from Anonymous. Anonymous is asking, Frater Acher, as someone with the benefit of years under the tutelage at IMBOLC, what advice do you have for newer practitioners without formal training who might be interested in experimenting with grimoires for the first time? Are there any spirits that might be better suited for initial work than others, such as the Olympic spirits of the Arbitel, perhaps?
Yeah, well, if somebody actually asked for my opinion or advice, I would tell them, don't dabble with these grimoires or magical books. Get a proper training, wherever you want to get a proper training, but get a proper training. The problem with magic mostly is that it always works. But when you practice it and you actually have no clue what you're really doing, that becomes really, really difficult and you can mess up your life quite a bit. So I think that actually applies to any crafts that you want to learn. You start with the basics and you learn from there. And yes, it takes a lot of time, but this is a craft. So why would it not take a lot of time?
Agrippa, we have some listener questions for you, of course, as well. And the first listener question we have for you is from Nictophile. And Nictophile is saying and asking, how does the school, IMBOLC, view the use of magic? What frameworks and theories does it teach? Does this school also have any relation with Quaria, seeing Frater Acher's involvement? What is the ultimate goal of a student in this school? I've been interested in the school for a while now, and I would love to know more about its curriculum and goals.
How the practical magic is used depends on an individual, as I said. To us, the responsibility of the application lies entirely on an individual and his ethics, his belief system, his attitude, and his objective. At IMBOLC, we regularly insist on the famous imperative by the famous German philosopher Immanuel Kant, which said, I say it in English, act only the way which you would like to become a general law, though our responsibility is limited to the teachings and not to the use of magic. The ultimate goal of a student in our school is to become a genuine magician, fully aware of the responsibility he bears with regard to the mysteries and the use of them. So you are very welcome to visit our website, Nictophile, for more details before you enroll in the trial semester. First, you have to write a short essay and fill out the questionnaire. That's all. And as for Quaria, there is no connection at all between Quaria and IMBOLC. I don't even know the head of this school. I would also like to point out that Frater Acher was once an IMBOLC student, but is not currently a member of our school or working for our school. I think it's an important information, but we are best friends. We are sitting on bicycles and making downhill rides. But he's not working for our school. He is an ex-student, a long-term student, and however, Frater Acher and I have really a friendly relationship in our private lives, and we often meet as he lives not so far from me. But maybe Frater Acher can tell something about Korea, because I also often ask, and we have a lot of students coming from Korea to our school.
I think this would be a wonderful, longer conversation if we had maybe now a couple of beers or a glass of wine set in a pub, and then we could kind of spend an evening over this. But let me try to make this super short. Part of why I loved this conversation so much and this podcast was really to help portray more about how IMBOLC works, what it's trying to do, the deep polymath foundations of it, the strong scaffolding that it offers to its students through mentorship and through the teaching letters. All of that, in my eyes, is very unique to IMBOLC. Korea has a completely different approach to things. You begin working the Korea course really by yourself, and you need to practice it by yourself up to a certain point at which mentorship becomes an option. I haven't practiced Korea to the degree that I've practiced IMBOLC's material at the time. I'm very good friends with Agrippa, and I'm very good friends with Josephine McCarthy, but it's completely different approaches, completely different intentions, and written by completely different minds. So I can't say, do this or do that, check both of them out. There's ample of material, on either of the websites. And maybe you do one, and then after a few years, you do the other. But as I said, after a few years, a month or two will not teach you anything. Like, you got to invest more, whichever of the two schools you do.
Agrippa, we have another listener question for you from Emotional Support Wombat, who is asking, what do you think of an older person, say in their 40s or 50s, beginning to study with a group? For one who has studied and practiced all their adult life, but someone who has not been able to work with a group. Same question, though, but this time with an absolute beginner.
I'm not sure what you mean with begin to study with a group, because IMBOLC provides an individual path with a mentoring tailored exactly for the needs of a student only. And so there is definitely no group. So there is, as I told you, the egregory, but that's a spirit. That's not a physical group. Okay, so you can say the students are a group. You have more than 100 or 200 students. So this is a group where maybe he's meaning that, that he can meet them in a forum, or I don't know. So we don't have any forum, but if you like a student because you have the emails and the student wants to give their emails out, then you can email that student and they have a relationship. But there is no classic group like in a lodge or an order. So the age is not really relevant. Neither is the background as a beginner. So in our school, everyone finds access to magic for himself, and the frame stays the same also regardless of the magical background. So whatever your age is, whatever experience you are welcome to walk your own path, but with our support, if you need our support. Our students come from all continents and are of all age groups, as I said before. Currently, it's from 21. It's a Russian girl and a 69-year-old French philosopher. I hope this answers the question somewhat satisfactorily.
Agrippa, as well, we have a listener question for you from JT Lopez, who is asking, what Western magic primers or training courses outside of your own, so outside of IMBOLC or maybe outside of Quaria, would you recommend, Agrippa, for the fledgling magician? Any other resources or anything?
Unfortunately, I can't say anything about this, as I'm not familiar with the contents and modalities of other apostrophized schools of magic. So IMBOLC is not networked with any other schools. That's the fact. No orders or other groups or lodges, and is definitely not in contact with them. So IMBOLC works completely independently, so I can't say anything about the content and modalities of other schools because I don't know them. I can tell him what the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn taught 40 years before. Yeah, but I don't think that is interesting.
Let me interject here, Agrippa, because previous guests have, and maybe this is where the question is coming from too, in terms of general reading. So, for example, would you recommend someone read the 3 books of occult philosophy by Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa? Would you recommend they read some of the classic grimoires or other classic works? Are there any classic works that you would recommend?
No. You can read what you want about theory, and there are so much authors out there which have a different meaning of what magic is. So, I mean, the main sentence comes from Aleister Crowley and has been modified a little bit over the years. No. The best thing is really you do it from scratch so that you can start as a beginner. And maybe you have read a little bit about Franz Bardon. It's a Czech magician, or from Eliphas Levi. That's okay. So, or Geshem Sholem for the Hebrew and Kabbalistic academic knowledge about Kabbalah, but not more. And definitely no books where you have to do a lot of practice parallel, because you have no person who can tell you that you are at the moment on the right way, or how to verify, as I told you before, if you do the right pranayama in the 4th state or in the 5th state. So for the 1st state, maybe it's okay. But so I have been 1 year in Tibet, in a Bön monastery, and they have done these practices, and I was so fascinated, but I can't do it. Yeah, I see what they do, but you can't. And so is what is written. So no, I'm sorry.
This next listener question, Agrippa, is from Anonymous, who is asking and saying, for Agrippa, can you share how your coursework treats the physical health and fitness of the student, and how physical health or habits might either aid or hinder progression on a path of magical study and practice?
Let me start with the second part of your question. There are indeed habits that might influence the magical study positively or negatively. And the more negative habits a student has, the more difficult for him it will be to walk his path. In case the progress on the transcendental scale is only possible through exchange the matter. So it is an individual decision of every student how far he wants to go, and therefore how much of the negative habits he sustains. As for the general health question of Anonymous, it is a big difference for us if a student has some limitations from the beginning of his or her life, or got some limitations through an accident or similar, versus being limited by his or own ego. And in the first case, there is not a problem to study at IMBOLC as the health limitation of any kind, and once clearly communicated, is considered and the curriculum is adequately adjusted. But in the latter case, however, a student will not make any progress in the longer term unless he is not willing to overcome the ego issues.
Agrippa, I cannot tell you how much of an honor it has been to chat with you. It's been so great, and I'm so thankful to you and, of course, to Frater Acher. As we wrap up the podcast, any final thoughts you'd like to leave listeners with?
I think it's enough said. You have to try it. You know, you can speak a lot about all these things in theory, and you have no idea what your body is doing and what your brain is doing. So go on our website and surf a little bit and read this and that, and maybe make contact with a mentor, and the mentor is sending a questionnaire. And when we got the questionnaire, we decide if we take the student. So not everyone can study at the moment, because we only have 6 mentors, and we want the quality standard is relatively high. And I have the private curriculum, the private lessons only. and my long-term students are in the distance learning course. So I could say some philosophical aphoristic statements, but it's enough said, and try it for only the trial semester. We have the first semester is called trial semester, and it is 6 months, and you can learn it from the scratch, from the absolute beginning. And if you feel that this is your way and you like it, continue. And maybe you continue for years, like Frater Acher. Maybe you finish after 2 modules or 3 modules, because you said, yeah, I have learned a lot about magic, but also for my life, as Frater Acher told us today also. So that would be my last words. And don't have any fear of magic, that magic could be functioning. And that sounds really easy, but it's difficult, because it's deep in our brain and our soul, because it's so powerful what you learn when you are a little child and your parents go into church and you, only for example, and you do not like it. And then when you are 20 or 30 years old, you want to learn magic, but you have something unconscious, which tells you, is it okay if I'm doing this? Yeah. It's only for Jesus, that he walks on the water. Yeah. What are the magicians do? Try it for 6 months and then decide if it's your way or not. It's not a way for everyone. That's a fact.
Our immense thanks to, of course, magician and author Frater Acher, and as well, founder of the IMBOLC School, polymath, magician, teacher, author.
Thank you.
Agrippa, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your wisdom on the podcast today.
Thank you very much. Have a good time, and I wish you the very best for the future and your podcast. I love Glitchbuff.
Listeners, I hope you enjoyed that podcast as much as I did. It was amazing to hear how IMBOLC was founded, but also what it takes for in-depth learning and all of the great things that Agrippa has built over the years, but also to hear about the awesome relationship between Agrippa and his former student, Frater Acher, who I know so many of you are already familiar with. Definitely check out the podcast and video description for ways to check out IMBOLC's website, as well as, of course, Frater Acher's website as well. A huge thank you to Agrippa and Frater Acher, but also to each and every Glitch Bottle patron on patreon.com/glitchbottle. Your questions are amazing, and it is because of you that the podcast continues to grow in new and interesting ways. As always, this is Alexander Eth reminding you to invoke often, uncork the uncommon, and keep the light.